Okay, so this is Live2D cubism. This is where you make your visual model. For anyone who's starting out with this, there is a 42-day trial, and there's also a free version, like a flat-out free version of Live2D that you can download to try it out. There are very much limitations to the absolutely free version, as you can imagine. There's going to be a certain amount of pieces you can use, I think, and there's also going to be a certain amount that you can do with the parameters as well. Just bear in mind that it's possible as you're following this tutorial, if you're using the absolutely free version, you may end up running into a few hiccups here and there possibly. But I will do my best to try and make this as simple as possible so that you can actually follow this tutorial. But yeah, just to bear that in mind, you probably could do with downloading the actual 42-day version of the software. But anyway, hopefully the video will generally help you out with learning overall how to do this. And like I say, I'll be doing my best to keep this as simple as I possibly can and make it easier for you guys to learn how to use the software. Alrighty, so to begin with, all we have to do is find our PSD file. So the PSD file is right here. I just drag and drop it into Live2D. This is what you would call usually the scene as well. This is where your model will be. While we're here though, I'm actually going to delete the background. Like that, because we don't need that layer anymore. But if you did want to change the background of your workspace, because when you delete the background you'll find that it's just fully checkered pattern because it's opacity basically, but you can change it in this little color corner here. I put it on to a kind of solid grey so I can see what I'm doing, but all you have to do is just click on this little box here. It says change background color or opacity of the canvas, and just bear in mind this does not apply to your actual visual model in any sort of way. It's not a solid layer or anything like that. This is just so that you can temporarily change it from being like this to this, so you can actually see what's going on. I use it all the time. It makes it easier for my eyes to be able to see where everything is. So I'm just going to run down what we're seeing here in the software, right? Because it does seem quite overwhelming, I think, for a lot of people who are starting out. You have the parts window, which is on the far left, which is pretty important. It's basically what we were seeing in Paint Tool Sci. It's just the folders, the parts within the folders, and basically everything I wrote down. Then you have the Deformer window right here. So I'm just going to drag this out a little bit. So this is all of the parts not in folders, but this is where you would navigate your deformers. I use the deformer window probably more so than I do the parts window, but this will be quite important while we're working with deformers, and I'll show you what a deformer is soon. But that's, you know, these are two very important windows. I tend to find myself going between both the parts window and the deformer window, but mostly the deformer window. Then you have the tool details window, which basically, depending on what you're highlighting, so say for example if we're clicking on the Deform Path Edit tool, you'll see it changes and you've got different options for it. Again, we'll go into what the Path Edit tool is, but depending on your tools it changes to different things. The inspector window, when you click on a part, this is where you can manage things like the name of your layer, like this part here, your ID, so you can give your parts a different name for an ID. You've also got your parts as well here too, and you've got the clipping ID as well, which is also very important if you want to create masking for things, but it's very common in making standard eyes. This is very different eyes what we're working with right here, but if you're making a more advanced eye like a human eye, the iris would have to be clipped so that it would be within the white of the eye and it won't go outside of the white of the eye, that kind of thing. It just helps you sort of crop things within a piece. But like I said, we don't have to worry about it for this tutorial. We've also got things like draw order. So if, you know, we have this piece highlighted, I can change the draw order so it's actually behind. That kind of thing. And you can see that it also moves the little red bar there too. Now, sometimes that can be good for parallax effects, I think, or you just want to send something backwards, and instead of completely relying on the layer layout of what we've got it kind of set to, you can use the draw order instead. But it can be useful sometimes, depending on whether you need to actually have a certain piece be in front or at the back of your model. Opacity, again, is just to lower the opacity of a piece. So that's something that's quite useful, especially when you're making expressions and wanting them to appear and disappear for on and off expression toggles for VTube Studio. There's the blending modes here, so this is where you would also add whatever effect you want. There's only two, well, technically three, because you got the normal, so that's how we see it right now, it's set to normal, but we can change it to additive or multiply. Let me just show you the part, which is this one here. Actually, it's this little part here that I said was meant to be an additive effect. If we can locate it down here that says shadow, and we can apply the additive effect to it. Ignore this message. I would actually go as far as to say is don't show this again, because it's kind of pointless. But as you can see, it's added an effect to it. I'd say this is closest to the effect I was intending. But yeah, you know, that's one way of basically adding a little bit of an effect to your models. I like to use additive, in fact, as a way of adding glow. Whenever I have like glowy eye characters, or just, I don't know, lights on the characters in some way, and I wanted to give it like a bit of a glow, I would use this effect basically to kind of really define the glow of the character. Of course, multiply is multiply, though. I think everyone knows about multiply, right? Like, it makes everything darker, really. And a lot of the time multiply is used for shadow. So say, for example, you could have it set to multiply, but you can lower the opacity a bit so that it's subtler. Multiply is probably the basic way of adding a bit of shadow to a character, or in normal blending mode terms in most art software. In my case, I'm going to just keep it to additive, because that was the closest I could get to shine in Paint Tool Side 2. The other thing I wanted to show you here was multiply color and screen color, and this is actually pretty cool. With whatever blending mode you have selected, it works for both multiply, additive, and normal. You can change the color of the piece you have highlighted that you're changing the blending mode of, or keeping the same. Like, say for example, if it is normal, you can change the color of it a bit. So if I was to click on, say, the screen color here, you can change it to whatever color you want. But it's a really cool little feature, really, and if you wanted to reset, just go on reset and it will bring it back to normal again. And I think this is actually really nice, because if I put it on additive, I can literally just change the multiplier of it and give it a different kind of color and just mess around with that for a bit, and whatever kind of suits you, you can just add it. And again, it's just a nice little feature that Live2D has. It's really up to you. You can keep it as it is, or, you know, I might kind of, I don't know, leave it on here like that. So that's the inspector window and what you can do with it overall. Now the next window here, probably the scariest part of them all, let's face it, is the parameter window, and this is basically where you rig your character. It has all of the parameters you need, basically, but these are the main basic parameters used for creating a VTuber model. Like X and Y and Z are the main movements of your character. You've even got body X, Y, and Z down here, which you can separate from. You can have a head rotation, for example, and you can have a body rotation that are separate to each other, that kind of thing. And there's the breathing parameter for idle. These are usually used for hair movement as well, but you can technically make your own. I say hair movement, I mean physics. So these parameters are usually used for physics, but you can make your own. That's the thing, you can make your own parameters. It's just making sure that you've assigned it to the right IDs and stuff. I think cheek is usually used for things like blushing. I don't usually do that though, but you can add like a slight sort of blush to your character. Say for example, don't know, every time your character smiles or something, and you can rig it so that the blush happens, you know, that kind of thing. Mouth open and mouth form is obviously for rigging the mouth, and all of these eyebrow settings and eye settings, they're both for left and right eye as well. I'm going to be rigging it so that it only works on one of your eyes, not both, because I just believe it's better that way. It's more reliable in the way it moves and blinks and such, because I've just seen so many VTuber models at this point where the one eye is closed slightly than the other, which is completely open. It just Unless you have iPhone tracking and you're not using webcam tracking of any sort, I just recommend just sticking with just the one eye tracking, because like just find that dominant eye that your webcam's going to capture and be like, right, okay, I'm just going to rig it to my left eye because that's where the webcam is going to see it the most. My most dominant eye with the webcam is the left eye, then say my right eye, because the idea is that if it's seeing my left eye more, it can tell that I'm blinking more than say the right eye, where if I have my head turned to the right, it's going to be too covered and the webcam's not going to see that right eye so well. Personally, for me, I think that's just the most accurate thing you can do. Of course, it means you can't like do a little wink with your character and stuff like that, but as far as I'm concerned, it's a necessary sacrifice, because like for the occasional little wink you want to do, like, is it really worth it, you know, to just have your eyes be a lot of the time a bit derpy, and to have your eyes be a lot of the time not function very well and not look well and look good. I know that's preference, personal preference at the same time, but I just think that if that's something that bothers you, because I know it bothers me every time I see it in a VTuber model when they kind of have like these sort of eyes that don't quite work, then I guess it just sort of makes sense, right? Lots of eye parameters, and like I say, we will be though focusing on the one, and we don't even have to worry about the brow though this tutorial, because we technically don't have an eyebrow for this character. With that, we've got the tools up here, which is worth kind of like telling you what each button does here, because some of these are quite important. Edit Texture Atlas is a very important thing. I'd go so far as to say make this be the first thing you do when you work on a VTuber model, is to create a texture atlas. And this is basically like a texture map of sorts of your character that VTube Studio or other software using models like this will be able to look at what you've created and know exactly how it looks, because you've made a texture map for it. If you don't have a texture atlas, it's not going to know what it looks like, it's just going to be invisible. Edit Mesh Manually is also the button you would press if you wanted to create your own meshes, so your own vertices, your own meshes generally. And you need to be doing this for all of your model as well, like not to edit manually though, technically you don't have to make your own vertices for every single piece, because that would be very time consuming, but it's very important to have this because this is what's going to allow you to deform your model. Moving on from that, we have the automatic mesh generator, and this is an absolute lifesaver as far as I'm concerned, in the sense of it basically makes your own vertices for your model. Like I say, as I was saying before, sometimes it's still good with certain parts of your model to make your own, which is what we will be doing with the Edit Mesh Manually. For the mouse shapes specifically. But Auto Mesh Generator is very good if you're just wanting to quickly put a mesh on all of your pieces. I would say fantastic for far bigger pieces for your character as well. It just makes the whole process a lot easier and quicker. So yeah, that's Automatic Mesh Generator. Then we got Create Warp Deformer. This is the most used tool that I have when making a VTuber model. I use it as a way of creating effectively deformers for all of my pieces, even to map them out a little bit like I have done with the folders as well, like a form of creating folders within each other in the deformer window, so I can kind of better position things and know where everything goes. But mostly I use them to actually deform the model so that I can give it perspective, so I can give it bounce, so that I can give it movement generally. The next one is also something called Create Rotation Deformer, which is a deformer that allows you to add a rotation to certain parts. So I can have it made so that, say, the hands rotate a little bit from side to side from the anchor point that I give it, which again, I'll show you that once we get into it. Which is a far more, if you're looking to create a rotation, a clean rotation without doing it manually, because you can do it with the Warp Deformer, but it's not as easy. You can basically make rotation deformers, which would be a lot simpler and easier with an anchor point, just to kind of rotate it with a little handle, and it works really well. There's also a new one here which I don't use too often actually, and it's called Rotation Deformer Creation Tool, and it allows you to create your own deformers like by hand basically. So if I was to click on the right hand piece here, I can just click and drag a rotation deformer like this, and if I was to go on the select tool here, I can just rotate it. Which is nice really, because I guess it makes it a little quicker and easier than say the previous one. I don't know if there's more potential with this in the sense of like if I was to make more of these. Probably can actually, I suppose. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one. I know why that's not working, because basically it's within the hand rotation deformer here. So I wonder if there's something more to that, but I don't actually know. But what's nice about it is that you can make your own, just flat out really quickly like this, when before I think you had to be a little bit more manual with it. So like say for example, if I was to use the right hand as an example and create rotation deformer, you'd go through this process basically, and then you'd go on create, and then it's kind of already default to an upwards handle like this. So I'd have to like edit the handle position with the control click and then extend the handle, and you know, you'd still have to probably do this to a certain degree, and I don't know, that seems kind of nice. I appreciate that. I think that's kind of a cool little addition that they've added. But like I say, don't worry about what we just did there. We'll go into that. We will eventually get into rotation deformers. The next one is the arrow tool. I think it's quite self-explanatory really. Like this is the select tool. So you can just move things around like this, and you can highlight vertices, or you can highlight just literally everything. It's your select tool. You also have the lasso tool. What's kind of nice about this is if you have vertices and stuff like that, you can actually select the vertices with this, and I think that's pretty much what it is, to be honest. But since we don't have any vertices, I can't really demonstrate it yet. We got something called the brush selection tool. So again, I think this allows you to select certain vertices, and what's nice about it actually is that it has like a little bit of a fade effect, as you can see there. That kind of gives it a sense of, right, yeah, the most reddest part here, I want this to be more deformed than say the lightest part of the effect there. Again, I can't really demonstrate that very well, but it can be quite good with deformers. You can do this with the actual part directly, but I choose not to use the part in that way, just because if anything needed to be changed opacity wise or anything like that, it would make it very difficult. So again, that's its talk in itself, and we will get to that. But yeah, it's a pretty useful tool, and I do enjoy using it. It's actually a really cool little kind of hands-on way of deforming your vertices or your deformer points. The deform path edit tool again is really useful in that you can create points for a select piece. I use this all the time for the mouth specifically, because it allows me to edit the mouth very, very easily using points like this. But again, I can't really demonstrate it properly because we don't have proper vertices, but that would allow more of a bend, say, in that hand basically. Definitely one we're going to be covering this tutorial. So I've just decided to make some temporary vertices here just to demonstrate some of these, because it might be a little hard to get the point across otherwise, but like this brush is actually quite big, so let me just lower that down using the tools details settings here. Basically this is fantastic to edit more directly your parts. Again, I think this can be used for your deformers as well, but you can definitely use them on your vertices for your pieces like this. The outer ring here makes it so that the edits are actually a lot more subtler. The main middle circle here makes it so that everything gets kind of deformed and all at once, and is far like stronger in the drag. But when you go outside the circle, it's far more subtle. So as you can see, there's a difference in that. It's really nice because it kind of reminds me of the blur tool in Photoshop a little bit. Like you can kind of like move things a little bit very slightly using this brush. Again, along with this tool, I think it's actually pretty cool. Like selecting your vertices, or you know, and also you can change the settings here as well. Like you can change the weight of your brush. We have something called Edit Glue, and this is to do with gluing your parts together in a sense. So say for example, if you have a hand, a lower arm and a upper arm, you can make it so that you have vertices and you can have it glued together so that they move along with each other more naturally. Now again, glue I don't really think we're going to be touching on too much at all in this tutorial, because we kind of lack the parts for that. So yeah, you know, that's generally the whole window here. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of how to use certain things and what each button does. So we've got a little bit of an introduction to the software and how things are. I suppose these are pretty self-explanatory really, like display and your skinning and zooming in and out here as well. I tend to use the mouse wheel as well to zoom in and out of a scene like this, but if you can't, I do it manually like that. You've got settings here as well to do with recording, so you can actually record some already preset animations when you have sorted out your parameters here. So if you've created some X, Y, and Z movement, for example, you can have like a bit of a test run and see what it's like by pressing the play button here. And you can also change the animations here as well. And also if you go into the settings here, you can actually turn off certain parameters from the looks of things. I didn't even know this was a thing until now. Where, say for example, if you had a whole bunch of parameters that were on and off toggles, when you press the play button, it will actually play those out as well. If you didn't want that though, you could just literally untick them and the animation will play normally, so you can actually see the model moving properly without like the blurring in and out of expression toggles and such. So I think that's a pretty neat thing actually, that they've added that. I think there is a way of creating your own animations so that you can use it within the list here, but that's something I'll have to look into at some point. Probably here actually, it says recording settings, create a new animation file. But yeah, you know, you got a multi-view as well, so you can have like multiple views of your model and such. I don't really touch that, to be honest. I've only got so many monitors basically. You can reflect your character as well from one angle to another. You can focus on the selected element, so if I click on the right hand, I can focus on that, like that. So that's kind of nice, so that you can have a bit of an automatic zoom in. And take a screenshot as well. Also, we have at the top here model, that says model here. This is where you would actually change from the model view, which is what you're seeing right now, to something else. So in this case, the animation is the place you would go to the Live2D animation timeline, where you can do your own animations using this particular visual model. There's a lot I can go through as far as like this sort of stuff is concerned, but we're not going to do that right now because this is already a lot to take in, and I do feel like that the main tools that you needed to learn is basically here in the main screen. So we will move on to some of these as we go into the tutorial anyway, but I would say that this is the main basics of the interface of the Live2D software, and hopefully you feel a little bit less scared of it now, hopefully. But we will be going through how to rig this character though. By the end of it all, hopefully you'll feel a little bit more comfortable working in the software. So I'm going to go ahead and start rigging this character.